On today's show, Apple could be releasing the M5 MacBook Pro, iPad Pro, and Vision Pro before the end of this week. John Ternus could be Apple's CEO before we know it, and the iPhone Fold could be cheaper than you thought. Want the latest Apple news, leaks, and rumours? Subscribe and ring the bell. I'm iCaveDave and I simplify Apple so that everything just works for you. Okay, you're going to have to wait for my video on why Apple is leapfrogging the rest of the industry on AI, even though it's all scripted and ready to go, and no, it's not sarcasm. Be sure to subscribe and you'll understand why. But with Mark Gurman dropping the bombshell that Apple could be dropping M5 products this week, that has to take priority. Looking back at previous years, Apple has sometimes held a full event and other times simply dropped day-by-day product announcements, especially in October. This time, if Mark Gurman is right, it's probably going to be the latter. And if I had to guess, it'll be iPad Pro first, followed by the MacBook Pro, and then the Vision Pro, especially as that Vision is supposedly coming in space black or some other random name for grey this time. Not a huge change, but one that we want to see. I would guess there's not going to be huge changes to any of these products beyond the chip bumps, although there is a decent chance, I'd guess, that Apple includes some of those new C1X and N1 chips, possibly even finally adding the option of having cellular models for the first time in a MacBook. Now, that could be great as a differentiator for Apple, as I've said in the past. It could also mean that cell phone companies could start selling them like they do on contract with phones and iPads right now, which gives Apple another way of reducing the upfront costs of switching to the Mac. And that could be huge for adoption, because it's where they already sell more products than anywhere else. That would also bode well for Apple's forthcoming MacBook with the iPhone chip inside powering it, although I don't agree with some of the YouTubers out there that have suggested it'll use an A18 Pro inside. It'll almost certainly run the latest generation of iPhone chips, but it might not support some Pro apps like Final Cut Pro or Logic. And I feel like that's a fair trade for a laptop that is likely to be around the $700 mark. But these three new products getting announced this week, as far as we know, with orders likely to start on Friday and then shipping next week, of course makes a lot of sense ahead of Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and that other one that comes in December. Keep your eyes peeled. Next up, John Ternus, Apple's Vice President of Hardware Engineering, could be stepping into the role that Tim Cook has held since Steve Jobs stepped down in 2011. It follows Jeff Williams' announcement earlier this year that he would be leaving his role as COO, having spent the remainder of the year as the SVP of Design, Watch and Health, and Luca Maestri stepping down from the CFO position. Now, these changes signal the biggest reshuffle in Apple's C-suite in many years, and may well be setting the scene for Ternus to take the reins at the top of the company in the very near future. Apple's hardware has garnered much praise over the past few years, with many of the presumed minimalist decisions made by Sir Johnny Ive being swept away recently.
Make the notebook fundamentally thinner, lighter.
The MacBook Pro has regained many of its previously missing ports, along with not favouring pure thinness over function, and the latest round of iPhone Pro 17 models also seem to echo this design direction, choosing the best material for the job,
Aluminium,
for that phone's function. And before we get to your questions in iCaveAnswers, iPhone Fold could have a lower price tag than we imagined. Now, this is coming from Guoming Chi. The hinge mechanism that Apple is building is much less expensive to produce than expected, around $70 to $80 rather than $100 to $120, which is what the markets were expecting. Possibly not because it's lower quality, but just the scale that Apple is able to leverage and the optimization in the design and assembly processes. Now, it's expected that the iPhone Air released last month could be a sneak peek at the design language that Apple will use for the folding phone as well, though. Now, please, Apple, don't call it the iPhone Fold. I could go with iPhone Air Flex. That actually sounds quite epic. Let's get into your questions, and as just we used to do in the old days, use hashtag iCaveAnswers with your comment in the comment section below if you want me to answer it on a future show. I'm still waiting for a 7-inch plus iPhone Pro Max. Please, when is it coming or happening? The iPhone Fold seems to have a smaller outer display at 5.5 inches. That's too small for Pro Max users. So sticking with the folding phone, the Foldy Boy, that we've just been talking about, 5.5-inch outer display. Remember, that doesn't line up with what a 5.5-inch iPhone display would be, which is kind of like what we would have in, let's say, the previous iPhone SE. Wasn't too far off of that, the smaller one with the home button still. This is going to be narrower and taller, so It's not really comparable. That's like saying that, you know, a 6.9-inch iPhone is nearly as big as a 7.9-inch iPad mini. The display size is completely different because the aspect ratio is different. So this is going to be tall and thin, and you open it up when you want to use it as a proper phone. Now that they can fit the whole iPhone motherboard into the camera bump of the iPhone Air, does that mean that iPads can get even thinner and bigger? I don't think they need to. I do think that the iPad Pro being so massive and thin is really impressive, but I'm also not sure that that is really what they need to focus on. I think the software, which has had a great bump this year, has been fantastic. I do think, though, that it would make a lot more sense if Apple used the same board designs for multiple iPads, just so that they could keep costs down, they could have things more interchangeable from their own side for the repairs, because the same chips, the same boards, like an iPad Air could use the same board as an iPad mini, could use the same board as the base iPad with just different chips on there, or as the generations go up, and just make it plug and play for themselves. Much easier. I was fairly disappointed with the Apple Watch Ultra 3. The screen got barely any bigger. When will we get an actually bigger display? Unfortunately, human wrists have not got that much bigger, so I think putting anything bigger than this on your wrist is going to look a bit like a Pip-Boy. Regular watches don't typically get that much bigger than the iPhone Ultra. I think it would just become unwieldy, and you would be bumping it against stuff a little bit more, and I don't think that's ideal. So will we get a bigger actual display? I don't think it's going to get that much bigger. iCaveAnswers. Is it true that next year we'll get a bigger iPhone Air? According to Ross Displayman, he said there's a bigger one coming. What size can we expect? I'm not even sure if we will get another iPhone Air next year. The reason that I say this is because, they didn't give it a number. And I think that speaks volumes. I think iPhone Air is going to be one of these devices that gets updated sometimes, because it's more about the style than the speed. It doesn't necessarily need the huge levels of performance, as long as that battery is working well. And by all accounts, the battery life on it is pretty stellar, based on how we were all worried before it came out. I would say, like, anything bigger than that, you're also going to then get more in towards the territory of this thing will bend, because the bigger something is, while being thin, the more likely it is to have those turning moments on it, and it is going to bend. That being said, Ross Displayman Young is rarely wrong about the components that he sees. Where he has made mistakes in the past is knowing which product this is for. So it may not be for an iPhone Air, but the display that he's looking at may be for a future iPhone Pro. There's rumours that under-screen Face ID might not be ready, so Dynamic Island might shrink, but when will it go away? And will the 20th anniversary iPhone get major upgrades? I think that this year's iPhone is probably one of the bigger upgrades that we're going to have for the foreseeable future. We've got 2 years until we get to the iPhone 20th anniversary, I guess, because it was 2007. We'll be on 2027. So maybe there will be something crazy. I don't know what it's going to be. It might be that we do special editions where they're different colours, perhaps, or they have some kind of different finish. Under screen Face ID, I don't particularly care about, because the Dynamic Island is useful. Any under display cameras have compromises in terms of the actual quality of the camera. I would prefer to have a good camera, as Apple has just done with these square censored FaceTime cameras, rather than having an under display one, because I don't think it really matters. When are AirPods 5 coming out, and when can we expect to get 8+ hours battery on the buds, since they won't have a heart rate sensor and as strong at ANC? AirPods 5 have been mentioned by Mr. Gurman as well this week. Apparently Apple is already working on the Pro 4s and AirPods 5 and other stuff, but they probably have been for a few years. My guess is that they will be either next year or the following year. Typically, there's a 3-year gap between different generations of the AirPods. The heart rate sensor thing probably won't make much difference in terms of the battery life, if I'm being completely honest. And the ANC isn't weaker because of software or because of the chip. It just doesn't have a physical seal in your ear, so it doesn't make a big difference there. However, if the new AirPods Pro 3 have got better battery life and appear to have got smaller, there must be something going on with Apple's optimization. So I would expect them to get longer battery life, but right now they're still not bad. Even my AirPods 3 do really well. Wonder if the ear fittings from AirPods Pro 3 will be available separately for sale. Will they fit AirPods Pro 2? Oh, this is a really difficult one. I haven't had hands-on with any AirPods Pro yet because I've never been an AirPods Pro user. But I have a feeling the fitment will be different, and I don't think Apple will sell them first party. However, now that the design is out there and the way that they're working will be able to be sort of imitated by third parties, I'm sure there will be backwards compatible versions that you'll be able to get for your AirPods Pro 2. Give people like a couple of months. I don't think anyone was quite expecting what we got with AirPods Pro 3 in terms of those earbuds. So just give it a few more weeks, maybe a month or two, and I'm sure there'll be third-party versions out there. And that is it for this show, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my Patreons. Thank you for being here till the end. And if you've got a question for me for a future show, hashtag iCaveAnswers down in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe because it's a banger. Want the latest Apple news, leaks, and rumours? Subscribe and ring the bell.